So a sound argument is a valid argument that has actually true premises, not if the premises are true, then the conclusion. No, the premises are in fact true. So if you, let's say, said something like, uh, rabbits have 4 legs, birds have 2 legs, rabbits have more legs than birds. That would be valid. And my premises consist of rabbits have 4 legs and birds have 2 legs. Those premises, right, those sentences, they say something about the world and they are true. So it's valid and the premises are in fact true. They're not supposed, they're not just presupposed to be true for the sake of discussion. No, they are in fact true. We're not just imagining them as true and then saying what follows. No, they are in fact true. So a sound argument has to be valid, but a valid argument may not be sound. So understand that sound arguments, if you like, you can think of, if this is the world of sound arguments, right? Then some arguments that the world of sound arguments will have, some of them will contain valid ones. Some of them will be valid, and yet some valid arguments will be outside of the sound. So the valid will be outside as well. So in other words, that's a valid argument, but not sound. But every sound argument has to be valid as well. So the validity is a bigger thing than the soundness. So it partially overlaps, but it also contains valid arguments that are not sound. Let's look at something a little bit, shall we say, a little more important and a little bit, shall we say, a little somewhat off-putting, but I think it's an important thing to look at. Here's something like you see in typical propaganda, and the argument is made, it's got validity, but there's still a problem with it. So it goes something like this, you'll hear stuff like this. Members of a community Z are a threat. Threats should be blocked from entering the country. And so Z people, because they're a threat, and threats should be blocked, Z people should be blocked from entering the country. All right. Now, you might find that argument off-putting. It is. But why is it? What's the problem with it? How would you respond to it? Well, is it valid? Yeah, it's valid. So the reasoning is logical. But remember, things can be valid, logical, but that doesn't mean they're good arguments by any means. So this one is something you would have to say, well, wait a second. It's not just simply that if the premises are true, then the conclusions are true. Then the conclusion is true. I want to know for sure if the premises are in fact true. And so this is where you can counter these things, where you would say, and this is where people often, when they offer propaganda, they want to have it where you don't question the next step and say, wait a second, if it's valid, I don't know if it's sound. Or as someone who's putting forward an argument, they might say, well, my reasoning is flawed. Find the fault in my reasoning. And there really isn't, but nonetheless, if you don't understand that it's not sound, you can easily get caught in thinking, well, maybe that is a good argument, when in fact it's not. So this idea of distinguishing between soundness and validity, and recognizing that some arguments can be sound, but some are out here too, right? They're valid, but they're not sound arguments. We wouldn't accept them. This is a good example of that. This is a living, unfortunately, living example of how a lot of times people will talk. They'll make these kinds of arguments where the logic flows quite well, but when you start asking questions about the soundness, that's where it falls apart. And these premises are simply not true. And so in that sense, it can be a valid argument, but it's not sound. So if it's valid and it's not sound, you have good grounds for either rejecting it outright or seriously questioning it and wanting to look more into these things. So the main point is that while the distinction between validity and soundness and all these things might sound, well, it's maybe the philosophers talk about that stuff and all that, and that's not real world stuff. No, actually, it has very large real world implications, because it's easy for people to get caught on thinking that an argument that looks good logically is a good argument, and that does not follow.